The metal chair creaked under Zethkari's weight as he shifted uncomfortably. His forearms were bound with energy shackles that glowed blue against his dark chitin armor. The detention room aboard the human ship felt too small, too bright. Everything about this place made his skin crawl. Captain Lisa Murphy sat across from him, her brown eyes studying his face. She had short blonde hair and wore the dark blue uniform of the Terran Defense Corps. Next to her stood Jake Torres, a tall man with black hair who held a datapad. Both humans looked calm, but Zethkari knew better than to trust their expressions. "State your name and rank for the record," Lisa said. Her voice was steady, professional. Zethkari's mandibles clicked together before he spoke. "Battalion Commander Zethkari of the Velkran 7th Shock Division." He paused, then added, "Former Battalion Commander." Jake activated the recording device on the table. A small red light began blinking. "Tell us about your first encounter with human forces." The alien warrior's eyes closed for a moment. Even now, 3 months after his capture, the memories still made his blood run cold. When he opened his eyes again, both humans were waiting patiently. "You want to know about humans," Zethkari said slowly. "You want to know what your own species is like from our point of view. Very well. But do not blame me for what you learn." Lisa leaned forward slightly. "We're listening." Zethkari began his story. 3 years ago, the Velkran Empire was expanding into what you call the Outer Rim. We had conquered 47 worlds in 2 decades. Each conquest followed the same pattern. Our scouts would survey the planet, count the population, assess their technology. Then our fleets would arrive and demand surrender. Most species submitted immediately. Those who resisted were quickly crushed. He shifted again, the shackles humming softly. "Your species was different from the beginning. Our first scout ship arrived at New Portland expecting to find a farming colony. The report said 12,000 inhabitants with basic tools and simple weapons. Nothing that could threaten a Velkran patrol ship." Jake made notes on his pad. "What happened to that scout ship?" "It never returned," Zethkari said quietly. "We sent another, then another. 5 scout ships in total. All vanished without sending distress signals. This was unusual." Lisa's expression didn't change, but Zethkari noticed her hands tighten slightly on the table edge. "So you sent a larger force?" "Yes. High Command decided the colony possessed hidden defenses. They ordered my battalion to investigate and pacify the settlement. 500 of our best shock troopers with full combat armor and heavy weapons. We expected to find perhaps some old defense satellites or hidden bunkers." The alien paused, his breathing becoming heavier. "We found something much worse. We found humans." Jake looked up from his notes. "Worse how?" Zethkari's 4 eyes focused on the human intelligence officer. "Because you fight like no other species in the galaxy. Every other race we encountered followed logical military doctrine. They had commanders who made rational decisions based on acceptable losses. They had soldiers who valued their own lives and retreated when facing certain death." He leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. "Humans do none of these things. You fight like you were born for war, like you enjoy it." Lisa kept her voice level. "Tell us about the landing." "We came down at dawn, standard assault formation. My troops were confident. They had fought the Zorvani Empire, the hegemony of 3 suns, the crystal fleet of Arcturus. All had fallen before Velkran might. New Portland looked peaceful from orbit. Green fields, small buildings, a few factories. Nothing threatening." Zethkari closed his eyes again. "The first sign something was wrong came when we detected no communication signals from the colony. No radio traffic, no data transmissions. Complete silence. My communications officer said it was like the entire settlement was holding its breath. We landed in what your people call Central Park, a large open area in the middle of the colony, perfect for establishing a command post. As soon as our transports touched down, we knew we had made a mistake." Jake stopped writing. "What kind of mistake?" The silence ended. Suddenly, the air filled with sounds we had never heard before, humans shouting but not in panic or fear. They were calling to each other, coordinating, preparing. Then came the music. Lisa frowned. "Music?" "Battle songs. Ancient human war chants. We learned later that your species has been singing while fighting for thousands of years. The sound chilled our blood. No civilized species sings during combat. Fighting is serious business, a necessary evil. But humans were celebrating." Zethkari's voice grew quieter. Then the shooting started. But it wasn't random fire or panic shooting. It was precise, coordinated, deadly. My advanced scouts reported muzzle flashes from buildings, rooftops, underground tunnels we hadn't detected. The humans had turned their entire colony into a weapon. How many defenders were there? Jake asked. 3,000. We learned this later from captured communications. 3,000 against our 500 elite troops. By all military logic, we should have won easily. Velcran shock troopers are trained from birth for warfare. Our equipment was superior. Our tactics were proven across dozens of campaigns. The alien warrior looked directly at Lisa. But your people don't follow military logic. We discovered this within the first hour of fighting. What do you mean? Lisa asked. I watched a human soldier take a plasma bolt to the chest. The wound should have dropped him instantly. Instead, he crawled 50 meters to a better firing position and continued shooting. He fought for another 10 minutes before dying. 10 minutes with a wound that would have killed any Velcron immediately. Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress. Another human, a female with red hair, was surrounded by 6 of my best warriors. She was out of ammunition, bleeding from multiple wounds. Any rational being would surrender. Instead, she pulled the pins from 3 grenades and charged my soldiers while screaming what we later learned was a human battle cry. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. What happened to your battalion? Jake asked. By sunset, we had lost half our force. The humans had lost perhaps 500 of their fighters. But while our soldiers were demoralized and requesting evacuation, the humans were singing louder than ever. They treated their losses like fuel for their fury. Zethkari looked down at his shackled hands. I requested immediate withdrawal and orbital bombardment. High Command refused. They said retreat from primitives would shame the Empire. They ordered me to press the attack. I should have disobeyed, he said quietly. I should have taken my remaining troops and left that cursed world. But I was a good soldier. I followed orders. Lisa leaned back in her chair. What happened next? Next? Zethkari's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. Next, I learned why the Velcran Empire now trembles at the mention of humanity. Next, I discovered that humans don't just fight wars. They perfect them. The recording device continued blinking as silence filled the room. Both humans waited for the alien to continue. But Zethkari just stared at the table, lost in memories too terrible to easily share. Finally, Lisa spoke. We'll continue tomorrow. As the guards led Zethkari away, he turned back to the 2 humans. Captain Murphy, you asked me to tell you about fighting your people. I will tell you everything, but remember this. When I am finished, you will understand why every species in this galaxy fears the day humans learn to travel between stars in large numbers. The door closed behind him, leaving Lisa and Jake alone with their thoughts and the blinking red light of the recorder. The next morning, Zethkari sat in the same chair, his forearms still shackled. Lisa Murphy and Jake Torres returned with fresh coffee and determined expressions. The alien warrior looked like he hadn't slept well. His chitin plates dulled and his movement sluggish. Ready to continue? Lisa asked, settling into her seat. Zethkari nodded slowly. You want to know about the real fighting? About what happened when we tried to take New Portland by force? He paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. Very well. But understand that what I tell you next, it changed how every Velcran views warfare forever. Jake activated the recorder again. Tell us about the second day. The second day began with what you humans call a briefing. My remaining 230 soldiers gathered in Central Park while I explained our new strategy. We would advance building by building, clearing each structure methodically. Standard urban warfare doctrine. Zethkari's eyes grew distant. The human defenders were commanded by Colonel Pete Adams and Major Katie Bell. We intercepted their communications during the night. Adams was a career soldier, calm and professional. Bell was younger, more aggressive. Together they commanded 3,000 militia fighters who had never fought an interstellar war before. Lisa made a note. Militia fighters? Farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, factory workers. Civilians with basic military training. Against Velcran shock troopers, they should have been slaughtered within hours. The alien shook his head. Instead, they became our nightmare. How? Jake asked. They turned their colony into a maze of death. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing ground. Every room held surprises that defied all military sense. Zethkari's voice grew tight with remembered tension. We entered the first building expecting frightened civilians. Instead, we found Sergeant Dan Foster. What was special about Foster? Lisa asked. Foster was a maintenance worker. fixed heating systems and water pipes before the war. But when my troops stormed his building, he had turned the entire structure into a weapon. He had rigged the heating system to spray superheated steam. The water pipes became pressure bombs. The electrical system could electrocute anyone wearing metal armor. Sethkari's breathing became heavier, but that wasn't the worst part. Foster could have used these traps to kill my soldiers from safety. Instead, he stayed in the building. He fought room by room, floor by floor. When we finally cornered him on the roof, he was bleeding from dozens of wounds and out of ammunition. What did he do? Jake asked quietly. He smiled at us. This human male, dying from blood loss and exhaustion, smiled like he was enjoying himself. Then he detonated explosives strapped to his chest. The blast killed Foster and 3 of my best warriors. It also brought down half the building. Lisa frowned. Suicide attacks aren't unknown in warfare. This wasn't a suicide attack, Sethkari said firmly. Foster wasn't trying to die for a cause. He was trying to win. The explosion was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage while protecting human civilians in the basement. Foster had turned his death into a tactical victory. The alien shifted uncomfortably, but Foster was just the beginning. As we pushed deeper into the colony, we encountered more humans like him. Corporal Amy Chen held a choke point for 6 hours against 40 Velcran warriors. She used every trick in the manual and several that weren't in any manual. Such as, Jake prompted. Chen had positioned herself in a narrow alley between 2 buildings. Perfect defensive position. But instead of simply shooting at us, she began talking, calling out to my soldiers by name, asking about our families, commenting on our tactics. She spoke broken Velcran, but she had clearly studied our language. Sethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly. This psychological warfare was unknown to us. Velcran military doctrine focuses on physical defeat of enemies, but Chen was attacking our minds. She would wound a soldier and then call out medical advice to help him. She would compliment our equipment while explaining how she planned to use it against us. Lisa leaned forward. What effect did this have? My troops became confused, angry, scared. They were trained to fight enemies who wanted to kill them. Chen seemed to want to educate them while killing them. It was disturbing on a level we couldn't understand. And she held that position for 6 hours? Jake asked. 6 hours and 14 minutes. Chen had limited ammunition and no resupply. She should have been overrun in the first assault. Instead, she rationed her shots, changed positions constantly, and used the environment like a weapon. She dropped construction debris on us. She flooded the alley with burst water pipes. She even redirected a flock of local birds to harass my aerial scouts. Sethkari paused, shaking his head. But the most terrifying thing was her attitude. Other species fight defensively when cornered. They become desperate, panicked, careless. Chen became more creative. The longer she fought, the more inventive her tactics became. By the end, she was setting traps while under direct fire and coordinating with other defenders across the colony, using hand signals we couldn't decode. How did the engagement end? Lisa asked. Chen ran out of ammunition. She called out to inform us of this fact, then requested a 5-minute truce to treat wounded soldiers on both sides. My lieutenant thought she was surrendering and agreed to the pause. Jake looked up from his notes. She wasn't surrendering? Chen used the 5 minutes to rig the entire alley with improvised explosives made from construction materials. When fighting resumed, she detonated them while charging our position with a broken piece of metal as her only weapon. The explosion killed Chen and 7 more of my warriors. The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Lisa spoke. These sound like exceptional individuals. Sethkari's laugh was bitter. That's what we thought too. Surely these were elite human warriors, specially trained for this kind of combat. But as the day continued, we learned the truth. Every human in that colony fought like Foster and Chen. Every single one. That's impossible, Jake said, is it? We captured communications between human fighters. They weren't following complex battle plans or using advanced equipment. They were improvising everything, making up tactics in real time, turning civilian tools into military weapons. And they were enjoying it. Sethkari's voice dropped to a whisper. By evening of the second day, we had taken perhaps 10 buildings. The cost was 90 more Velcran dead and twice that number wounded. The humans had lost maybe 300 fighters, but their morale was higher than when the battle started. How could you tell? Lisa asked. They were still singing. Battle songs, work songs, songs we couldn't identify, human voices echoing through the colony like they were celebrating instead of dying. Some of my soldiers began to break down. They couldn't understand how an enemy could become more dangerous as they lost ground and personnel. Jake made more notes. What was your assessment at that point? I reported to High Command that we faced an enemy unlike any in Velcron experience. I requested immediate reinforcement of at least 2 more battalions. I also recommended orbital bombardment if reinforcements weren't available. What was their response? Seth Curry's eyes closed. They laughed. High Command found it amusing that 500 elite troops couldn't defeat 3,000 farmers and shopkeepers. They ordered me to complete the mission with existing forces or face court-martial for incompetence. So you continued fighting, Lisa said. Yes. On the 3rd day, we changed tactics. Instead of building by building clearing, we would concentrate our forces and punch through to the colony's command center. Quick decisive strike to capture or kill the human leadership. Did it work? Jake asked. Sethakari opened his eyes and looked directly at both humans. It worked perfectly. We broke through their lines, destroyed their command post, and captured both Colonel Adams and Major Bell by noon. Lisa frowned. Then you won? We thought we had won. Adams and Bell were both wounded and in custody. The human command structure was broken. Their heavy weapons were destroyed. Victory seemed certain. Sethakari's mandibles clicked ominously. That's when we learned the most terrifying thing about humans, which was, humans don't need leaders to fight wars. They don't need command structures or supply lines or even weapons. Give a human a reason to fight and they become a weapon all by themselves. When Adams and Bell were captured, the remaining defenders didn't surrender or retreat or panic. They became more dangerous. Jake stopped writing. How is that possible? Because humans practice something called initiative. Every soldier is trained to make command decisions when necessary. But it goes deeper than that. Humans seem to fight better when they're losing. Desperate circumstances don't break their morale. They improve their performance. Sethakari leaned forward as much as his shackles allowed. By the end of the 3rd day, I had lost 150 more soldiers. The humans were down to maybe 2,000 fighters. But those remaining defenders had evolved. They were using our own weapons against us. They had decoded our communication frequencies. They knew our tactical doctrine better than some of my own officers. How long did the battle continue? Lisa asked. 7 more days. 7 days of fighting humans who learned something new every hour, who turned every defeat into a lesson and every victory. Sethakari sat straighter in his chair as Lisa and Jake returned for the 3rd session. The alien warrior's chitin plate seemed brighter today, as if talking about these memories was somehow helping him process them, but his 4 eyes still held the haunted look of someone who had seen the impossible. You mentioned reinforcements, Lisa said, settling into her chair. Tell us what happened when they arrived. Admiral Krexthor commanded the relief force. 3 battle groups, 15,000 of our finest troops with full orbital support. The Admiral was confident this would end the human resistance within hours. Sethakari's mandibles clicked softly. He had studied our reports but dismissed them as exaggeration. No primitive species could cause such casualties against Velcran forces. Jake activated the recorder. How wrong was he? Completely wrong, but not in the way we expected. Sethakari paused, organizing his thoughts. When the reinforcements landed, we discovered that New Portland had changed. The colony we had been fighting for 10 days was gone. In its place was something else entirely. What do you mean? Lisa asked. The humans had rebuilt their entire settlement during the fighting. Not repaired, rebuilt. They had turned every structure into a fortress, every street into a defensive line, every room into a potential command center. It was like fighting an enemy that evolved while you watched. Sethakari's breathing became heavier. But the buildings were the least of our concerns. The real terror was what the humans had done with our equipment. Your equipment? Jake looked up from his notes. Captured weapons, armor, vehicles, communication devices. Everything we had lost during the first 10 days of fighting. The humans had studied it all, reverse-engineered it, and improved it. The alien warrior's voice carried a note of disbelief even now. Dr. Ryan Park led their technical teams, a human engineer who specialized in agricultural machinery before the war. Lisa frowned. Agricultural machinery? Farming equipment. Tractors and harvesting machines. But Park took one look at our plasma rifles and not only figured out how they worked, he made them better. More accurate, longer range, faster cooling systems. Within 3 days, Park had human farmers carrying weapons superior to what our elite troops used. Sethakari shifted uncomfortably. Park's partner was Commander Ellen Brooks, a former factory supervisor. Together, they turned the human resistance into something we had never encountered before. They didn't just adapt our technology. They combined it with human engineering in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "Give us an example," Jake said. "Velcran combat armor is designed for our physiology. 4 arms, chitinous skin, different joint structures. It should have been useless to humans." But Brooks modified captured suits to fit human bodies while improving the protection by 30%. She used human materials like steel and ceramics in ways our engineers had never considered. The alien warrior paused, his 4 eyes focusing on something beyond the walls of the detention room. But the technology was just the beginning. The real horror was how quickly humans learned to fight as a unit. "How so?" Lisa asked. Velcran military doctrine emphasizes individual excellence within rigid command structures. Each soldier has specific training and follows orders precisely. Human fighters seem to share knowledge instantly across their entire force. Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly. We would develop a tactic to counter one group of humans, only to discover that every defender in the colony had learned the counter-counter tactic within hours. They adapted faster than we could plan. Jake made notes. How did they communicate so efficiently? That was the work of Captain Steve Mitchell and Lieutenant Carol Davis. Mitchell was a teacher before the war. Davis ran a small business. Neither had formal military communications training, but they created a network that connected every human fighter using everything from radio waves to light signals to coded messages written on walls. "Coded messages?" Lisa asked. Humans developed their own tactical language during the fighting, symbols and abbreviations that let them share complex information with simple markings. A circle with 3 lines meant plasma rifle position. Approach from north. A triangle with dots indicated vehicle trap. Avoid main road. Our intelligence officers never broke their code. Zethkari leaned forward slightly. But the most disturbing thing was how humans treated the war itself. Every other species we had fought viewed combat as a necessary evil, something to endure until victory or defeat. Humans treated warfare like a puzzle to solve. "Explain that," Jake said. They experimented constantly, trying new tactics not because the old ones failed, but because they wanted to see if different approaches worked better. Human squad leaders would test 5 different assault patterns in a single engagement, keeping the most effective one for future use. The alien's voice grew quieter. "I watched a human team led by Sergeant Ben Clark attack one of our strong points. Clark's first assault failed with heavy casualties. Instead of retreating or calling for support, he regrouped and tried a completely different approach. Then another, and another. How many attempts did he make?" Lisa asked. 7. 7 different tactical approaches to the same objective. Each attempt taught Clark something new about our defenses. By the 7th assault, his team moved like they could read our minds. They anticipated our responses before we made them. Zethkari's breathing became more labored. Clark's team had started with 12 humans. By the 7th assault, only 4 remained alive. But those 4 fought with the combined knowledge of all 12. They had learned from their dead comrades and incorporated those lessons into their tactics. "That sounds like a typical learning curve," Jake said. "No." Zethkari's voice was firm. "Typical military learning takes weeks or months. Humans compressed that process into hours. They treated their own casualties as data points to improve performance. It was horrifying to watch," Lisa made a note. "What happened to Clark's team?" "They took our strong point. 4 humans against 23 Velcran defenders in prepared positions. Clark's final assault was so perfectly coordinated that we couldn't respond effectively. They moved like a single organism with 4 bodies." The alien warrior closed his eyes briefly. But Clark was just one example. Every human unit was doing the same thing. Learning, adapting, improving constantly. By the time Admiral Krexthor's reinforcements joined the battle, we weren't fighting the same enemy we had landed against 2 weeks earlier. "How had they changed?" Lisa asked. They had become something new. Not human civilians defending their homes, but a new kind of warrior that shouldn't have existed. They combined the determination of their original defenders with the technical knowledge they had stolen from us and the tactical flexibility they developed through constant combat. "Zeth." Carrie opened his eyes and looked directly at both humans. The reinforced assault began at dawn on day 11. 15,000 Velcran troops with air support and orbital bombardment capability, against maybe 1,500 remaining human defenders. Victory should have been automatic. Should have been, Jake prompted. Admiral Krexthor ordered a standard planetary assault. Orbital bombardment to soften defenses, followed by massive ground assault to overwhelm survivors. The bombardment lasted 2 hours and reduced half the colony to rubble. That must have broken their resistance, Lisa said. It should have. Any rational enemy would have surrendered after losing half their defensive positions. But humans aren't rational about warfare. They used the bombardment. Used it how? The orbital strikes created new defensive positions. Rubble fields that channeled our ground assault into kill zones. Collapsed buildings that became sniper nests. Crater patterns that provided perfect cover for human positions. Zethkari shook his head. They turned our own bombardment into part of their defensive plan. Jake stopped writing. That's impossible to plan for. Exactly. Humans didn't plan for it. They adapted to it in real time. Dr. Park and Commander Brooks had teams of engineers moving through the smoking ruins before the bombardment ended, repositioning equipment and creating new fortifications from the debris. How long did the ground assault last? Lisa asked. 16 hours. 16 hours of continuous fighting against humans who had learned everything we could teach them and improved upon it. By the end of the first day, Admiral Krexthor had lost 3,000 troops. The humans had lost perhaps 200 fighters. Zethkari's mandibles clicked softly. But those numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is what happened to Velcron morale during those 16 hours, which was, we broke. Not our lines or our equipment or our tactical positions. Our will to fight broke, because we realized we weren't fighting an enemy we could defeat through conventional means. We were fighting an enemy that became stronger every time we hurt them. The alien warrior's voice dropped to a whisper. That night, Admiral Krexthor sent a message to High Command requesting permission to withdraw. The most decorated fleet commander in Velcron history was asking to retreat from a human farming colony. Lisa and Jake exchanged glances. What was High Command's response? They relieved Admiral Krexthor of command and ordered the assault to continue under Admiral Vexmai. They also sent 2 additional battle groups with orders to reduce the planet to ash, rather than admit defeat to primitives. The 4th session began differently. Zethkari seemed more agitated, his forearms pulling against the energy shackles as Lisa Murphy and Jake Torres entered the room. The alien warrior's chitin plates were darker today, and his mandibles clicked constantly in what both humans had learned was a sign of severe distress. You seem troubled today, Lisa observed, taking her seat. Today I must tell you about the psychological warfare, Zethkari said without preamble. Yesterday I spoke of human technical adaptation and tactical learning. Those things were frightening but comprehensible. What I must describe now, it defies all understanding of civilized warfare. Jake activated the recorder and prepared his notes. Tell us about Admiral Vexmai's assault. Admiral Vexmai arrived on day 18 with 2 more battle groups. 30,000 fresh troops total, with orders to end human resistance through overwhelming force. Vexmai was known throughout the Empire for brutal efficiency. He had crushed 7 rebellions without losing a single ship. Zethkari's breathing was shallow. Vexmai's first action was to demonstrate Velcron power. He selected a human-held section of the colony and ordered complete destruction from orbit. Not tactical bombardment, but total annihilation. Every building reduced to atoms. What was the human response? Lisa asked. Nothing. Complete silence for 6 hours. Our communications intercepted no human transmissions. No movement detected in the ruins. Vexmai declared the demonstration successful and prepared for final assault. The alien warrior paused, his 4 eyes unfocused. Then the broadcast began. Broadcast? Jake looked up from his notes. Human transmissions on all frequencies. Not military communications or demands for surrender. Entertainment programming. Music, stories, educational shows. The humans began broadcasting their culture directly to our troops. Lisa frowned. I don't understand. Neither did we. At first, our intelligence officers thought it was some kind of code. But analysis revealed the broadcasts were exactly what they appeared to be. Humans were sharing their art, their music, their literature with an enemy that was trying to exterminate them. Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly. The broadcasts were led by Captain Steve Mitchell and Lieutenant Carol Davis. Mitchell had been a teacher, Davis a business owner. Neither had training in psychological operations, but they understood something about warfare that no other species had discovered, which was, they understood that the most effective way to defeat an enemy is to make them question why they're fighting in the first place. Jake made notes. How did entertainment broadcasts accomplish that? The programs weren't random. They were carefully selected to show human culture, human values, human dreams, stories about families and friendship and hope, music that spoke of love and loss and triumph over hardship, educational shows about human history, art, science. Zethkari's voice grew quieter. My troops began listening to these broadcasts during off-duty hours. At first it was curiosity about the enemy, but the content was compelling. Humans created beautiful things. They told stories that made even Velcran soldiers feel emotions we didn't have words for. What kind of emotions? Lisa asked. Sympathy, admiration, doubt. The alien warrior's 4 eyes focused on Lisa. My soldiers began asking questions. Why were we destroying a species that could create such beauty? What had humans done to threaten the Velcran Empire? Why were we killing beings who seemed more interested in sharing knowledge than conquering territory? Jake stopped writing. The broadcast demoralized your troops? Worse than demoralized. They humanized the enemy. That's a term I learned from captured human communications. Humans deliberately shared their culture to make Velcran soldiers see them as people rather than targets. Zethkari shifted uncomfortably. But the broadcasts were only the beginning of human psychological warfare. The real terror started when they began leaving gifts. Gifts? Lisa asked. Care packages for wounded Velcran soldiers. Medical supplies, food, entertainment materials, and personal messages written in broken Velcran script. The packages would appear near our field hospitals and supply depots overnight. We never detected how humans delivered them. The aliens' breathing became more labored. The messages were the worst part. Handwritten notes saying things like, "Hope you feel better soon and get well, your human friends." Sometimes there were drawings made by human children showing Velcran and human figures together under bright suns and smiling faces. Jake made more notes. How did your forces react? Confusion at first. Then paranoia. If humans could place packages anywhere in our camps, they could place bombs just as easily. But they didn't. Every package contained exactly what it appeared to contain. Helpful supplies and friendly messages from an enemy that should have hated us. Zethkari's mandibles clicked softly. Some of my soldiers began keeping the messages, reading them during quiet moments, showing them to comrades, discussing what they meant. The psychological impact was devastating to military discipline. In what way? Lisa asked. Soldiers who received packages began taking risks to avoid killing humans, missing shots that should have been easy, choosing non-lethal targeting when lethal force was authorized, warning human positions before orbital strikes. The alien warrior's voice dropped to a whisper. Admiral Vexmai executed 12 soldiers for these infractions, but the executions only made the problem worse. My troops began to see the Admiral as more cruel than the humans we were supposed to be fighting. Jake looked up from his notes. What did the Admiral do then? He forbade all contact with human broadcasts or packages. Soldiers caught with human materials faced summary execution. But the damage was already done. The psychological foundation of our military had been undermined. Zethkari leaned forward as much as his shackles allowed. Then the humans escalated their psychological campaign. They began targeting our officers specifically. How? Lisa asked. Personal messages. Humans had somehow accessed our personnel files and learned about our families, our backgrounds, our individual fears and hopes. Officers began receiving packages addressed to them personally, containing items that related to their specific interests or memories. The alien's 4 eyes widened slightly. I received a package containing a recording device. When I activated it, human voices sang a Velcran lullaby my mother had sung to me as a child. The pronunciation was terrible, but they had learned the words and melody perfectly. How did that affect you? Jake asked quietly. It terrified me more than any weapon. How did humans know about my childhood? How had they learned that specific song? What else did they know about me and my soldiers? Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly. But worse than the fear was the emotion the song created. For a moment, listening to humans sing my mother's lullaby, I felt homesick, lonely, guilty about what we were doing to their world. Lisa made a note. Did other officers receive similar packages? Every senior officer received something personal. Lieutenant Colonel Thexvi got a package containing pressed flowers from her homeworld, somehow preserved in perfect condition. Major Kretzol received recordings of poetry in his native dialect. Captain Vorthani got sketches of his children drawn from photographs humans shouldn't have had access to. Where did they get this information? Jake asked. We never discovered how. Human intelligence capabilities were apparently far beyond anything we had detected, but the personal nature of these messages devastated officer morale worse than any direct attack. Zethkari's breathing became shallow again. The psychological campaign reached its peak when humans began broadcasting individual messages to specific soldiers during active combat. Individual messages during fighting? Lisa asked, human voices calling out to my troops by name during firefights. Not threats or demands for surrender, but personal conversations. Hey, Krickstar, how's your wounded arm feeling? Or Vexmoth, your family must be worried about you. Why don't you go home and see them? The alien warrior's voice cracked slightly. Humans somehow knew the names, ranks, and personal details of soldiers they were actively fighting. They would comment on medical conditions, family situations, even personal habits while shooting at the same individuals. Jake stopped writing entirely. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible for humans at war. They had infiltrated our communications so completely that they knew more about my soldiers than I did. But they used this knowledge not to kill more efficiently, but to make my troops question everything about their mission. Zethkari looked directly at both humans. By day 25 of the siege, Admiral Vexmai's 30,000 troops were falling apart from within. Not from casualties or equipment failures, but from psychological breakdown. Soldiers were refusing orders, deserting their posts, and in some cases actively sabotaging their own equipment to avoid harming humans. What was the desertion rate? Lisa asked. 17%. Over 5,000 Velcran soldiers abandoned their positions and attempted to surrender to human forces. Most were captured and treated well, which only reinforced the psychological impact on remaining troops. How did humans treat prisoners? Jake asked. Better than we treated our own wounded. Captured Velcran soldiers received medical care, good food, entertainment, and educational opportunities. Some prisoners learned to speak human languages fluently. Zethkari entered the interrogation room for the final session moving differently than before. His forearms no longer strained against the energy shackles, and his chitin plates had regained some of their natural luster. But his eyes held a haunted quality that seemed deeper than physical trauma. Lisa Murphy and Jake Torres took their seats quietly, sensing that this session would be different from the others. The weight of the alien's previous revelations hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Today you'll learn why the Velcran Empire surrendered, Zethkari said before either human could speak. Why the most powerful military force in the galaxy fled from a single human colony, and why every species in this sector now fears the day humans expand beyond your current borders. Jake activated the recorder with steady hands. Tell us about Admiral Korthvek and the Grand Fleet. Admiral Korthvek commanded 100,000 troops aboard 50 of the Empire's most advanced warships. The Grand Fleet had never suffered defeat in 3 centuries of operation. Korthvek himself had conquered entire star systems without losing a single vessel. Zethkari's mandibles clicked softly. The Admiral's orders were simple. Reduce New Portland to atoms and make an example that would discourage other species from resisting Velcran expansion. No prisoners, no negotiations, no mercy. What happened when the Grand Fleet arrived? Lisa asked. Nothing. For 3 days, the fleet maintained position in high orbit, while Admiral Korthvek studied tactical reports from the previous month of fighting. He couldn't believe what he was reading. 2 full battle groups defeated by primitive farmers seemed impossible. The alien warrior's breathing became measured, controlled. On day 32, Admiral Korthvek began his assault. Not the gradual escalation of previous commanders, but immediate application of overwhelming force. Orbital bombardment that should have vaporized the entire colony within minutes. Should have? Jake prompted. The bombardment began at 0600 hours. By 0603 hours, Admiral Korthvek realized he was not fighting the same enemy described in tactical reports. The humans had evolved again. Zethkari leaned forward slightly. During the month of fighting, humans had not only been defending their colony and waging psychological warfare, they had been studying every aspect of Velcran military technology and doctrine. Dr. Ryan Park and Commander Ellen Brooks had turned New Portland into something that had never existed before, which was a fortress designed specifically to fight Velcran forces. Every defensive system was optimized to counter our weapons. Every tactical position was calculated to exploit weaknesses in our doctrine. Every structure was built to turn our own strengths against us. Lisa made notes. Give us specifics. Velcran orbital bombardment relies on targeting systems that detect metal concentrations and energy signatures. Human engineers had rebuilt their entire colony using materials that were invisible to our sensors. The bombardment struck empty ground while real defensive positions remained hidden. Zethkari's voice grew quieter. But the invisible defenses were just the beginning. Humans had weaponized their entire environment. The soil itself had been treated with compounds that reacted violently to Velcran plasma fire. Every bombardment strike created explosions far beyond the intended yield. "They turned your weapons against you," Jake said. "Worse than that, they turned our tactical doctrine against us. Velcran ground assault tactics depend on securing landing zones through orbital fire support. But human modifications made every landing zone a death trap. The harder we hit potential landing sites, the more dangerous they became." The alien warrior paused, his four eyes focusing on memories too vivid to ignore. Admiral Korthvek was forced to land troops without adequate fire support. 50,000 Velcran soldiers in the largest single assault of the entire war. Against how many human defenders? Lisa asked. Approximately 800. 800 humans against 50,000 Velcran troops with air support and armor. Zethkari's mandibles clicked. It should have been over in an hour. How long did it actually last? 72 hours. 72 hours of continuous combat against humans who had turned warfare into something approaching artistry. Jake looked up from his notes. Artistry? The best way I can describe it. Previous battles had been about humans learning to fight effectively. This battle was about humans expressing themselves through combat. They fought with creativity, imagination, and what I can only call joy. Zethkari's breathing became heavier. Major Alex Johnson commanded the northern defenses. Johnson had been a music teacher before the war. During the battle, he coordinated his troops using musical signals. Different melodies indicated different tactical movements. Complex harmonies conveyed detailed orders across multiple units. Musical battlefield communications? Lisa asked. It was beautiful and terrifying. Human defenders moved to rhythms only they could hear, flowing from position to position like dancers performing a deadly ballet. Our tactical analysts couldn't predict their movements because they weren't following military logic. They were following artistic principles. What kind of artistic principles? Jake asked. Improvisation, creativity, emotional expression through tactical movement. Zethkari's voice carried a note of wonder. Johnson's forces treated each engagement like a musical performance. They would establish themes, develop variations, create crescendos of violence that built to perfect tactical climaxes. The alien warrior shook his head slowly. Captain Beth Taylor commanded the southern defenses. Taylor had been a poet before the war. She coordinated her troops using spoken word patterns, turning orders into verses that conveyed both tactical information and emotional inspiration. Poetry as military communication? Taylor's troops fought with literary structure. Her battles had narrative arcs, character development, symbolic meaning that went beyond simple victory or defeat. They turned combat into storytelling, with each engagement building on previous chapters to create an overall epic of human resistance. Zethkari's mandibles clicked rapidly, but the most disturbing thing was how much humans were enjoying themselves. Previous battles had shown human determination and adaptability. This battle revealed human love of warfare itself. Lisa frowned. Love of warfare? Humans were singing during combat. Not battle hymns or war chants, but songs of pure joy. Laughter echoed across the battlefield, as human soldiers discovered new ways to confuse and defeat Velcran forces. They celebrated each tactical victory like artists completing masterpieces. That doesn't sound like normal military behavior, Jake said. Because it wasn't military behavior. It was play. Deadly, sophisticated, incredibly effective play. Humans had turned the most serious business in the galaxy into a game they were winning, through sheer creativity. Zethkari's voice dropped to a whisper. I watched a human squad led by Sergeant Mark Davis surround one of our heavy armor units. Instead of simply destroying the vehicles, they spent 2 hours turning the engagement into an elaborate puzzle. They disabled weapons systems individually, captured crew members one at a time, and finally convinced the remaining Velcran soldiers to surrender by teaching them human card games. Card games? Lisa asked. Davis's squad had somehow obtained playing cards and dice. During firefights, they would call out poker hands and lottery numbers while shooting. They turned combat into entertainment, making war seem like recreation rather than survival. The alien warrior's 4 eyes closed briefly. By the end of the first day, Admiral Korthvek had lost 15,000 troops. The humans had lost perhaps 50 fighters. But casualties weren't the real story. What was the real story? The psychological impact on surviving Velcran forces. My soldiers had never encountered enemies who enjoyed fighting them. Every other species treated warfare as tragedy, necessity, or duty. Humans treated it as fun. Zethkari opened his eyes. The second day was worse. Human creativity reached levels that defied all military understanding. They began setting elaborate traps that served no tactical purpose except artistic expression. Beautiful, complex, utterly deadly works of art that killed Velcran soldiers while making profound statements about the nature of conflict. Can you give an example? Jake asked. Lieutenant Karen White created what she called the Garden of Peace, a section of the colony where captured Velcran weapons were arranged in decorative patterns among flowering plants. The garden looked harmless, even beautiful, but every weapon was rigged to explode in sequence if disturbed, creating a deadly chain reaction that would spell out the word peace in 3 languages when viewed from above. Lisa made notes. How many of your soldiers were killed by this trap? None, that was the point. White's garden was clearly marked with warning signs in multiple languages. She wasn't trying to kill Velcran soldiers. She was making an artistic statement about the futility of war, while demonstrating human technical superiority. Then why was it terrifying? Because it showed that humans had moved beyond fighting for survival. They were fighting for self-expression. War had become their medium for creating art. That level of psychological evolution during active combat is something no other species has ever achieved. Zethkari's breathing became labored. The third day brought the final horror. Humans began singing in harmony while fighting. Hundreds of VE